Unleash the power of your mind. Wear a levity, raw, edgy, humorless apparel for the discriminating activists. Live free or cry. Welcome to another episode of Mind Matters, the talk program that provokes critical thinking, logic, and reason. We encourage all of our listeners to use their common sense in all of their decision making, especially if it involves an issue that you think is important or one that affects your liberties and God-given rights. Welcome back, Dan, and listeners, to another episode of Mind Matters, and where we discuss issues of the day. Well, I just want to, before we get started on this one, Hollywood, our curtain calls for masculinity dead there. Before we get started on this, I just want to let listeners know, first of all, again, we thank you for coming back to listen to Dan and I pick apart some of these subjects. But we want to let people know that on face, even though it might sound sensational, you know, Indiana Jones, the Temple of Emasculation, we want to let y'all know that the subject matter is deeper than the subject. And you know, give us a chance to explain what it is that we're talking about. Please make comments and please subscribe. But I think today's subject, you know, everybody or most people are familiar with the Indiana Jones Hollywood franchise. And this past weekend, their fifth installment came out. It was called The Dial of Destiny, and it was the most expensive Indiana Jones film to date, more so than all the other ones, even adjusted for inflation. I think it cost them $300 million to produce this film. And for all intents and purposes, it tanked at the box office. And I mean in a big way. And experts that are in that business of facts and figures and movie revenues say that it's going to be almost impossible for this movie to make a profit. And there are some out there in the Hollywood movie world that feel like that Hollywood, and even some really big time experts, believe that there's been a systematic emasculation of the alpha male character. And that's to be, you know, we can discuss that, but you know, when you look at the facts and the figures and what people are searching for when it comes to movies, it shows that audiences, moviegoers, still crave the alpha male. And, you know, you look at, like, you know, The Equalizer and Extraction and the Creed series and Mission Impossible and John Wick. These movies have historical alpha male characters, and they remain at the top of the search engines of what people are interested in. But yet we go to a movie, and it's been even in the Star Wars episodes where the women they're not the heroines, they're the heroes. The male alpha males have been reduced to these caricatures of masculinity, and it's G.I. Jane, you know, it's women beating up on men and all this crazy stuff that in reality, I don't think that happens. I mean, and I think that what we're seeing here is a systematic destruction of Hollywood itself, which is part of the American culture, and really an attack on the Western image of the male. You know, so push aside, you know, conspiracy theories, you know, go to the movies and see. And you know, the movies that I was raised on, you always had a distinct male and you had a character or characters and distinct female characters. And the men were men, and they exhibited their masculinity, and the women were, and there was nothing wrong with it. I mean, some of those classic movies, I mean, come on, Casablanca, and you know, men were men and women were women. Sure. And now we're in a different realm now. And I wonder if it's just indicative of society as a whole, where men are no longer seen as men, but something different, some weakling or something like that. Dan, give me some initial comments, and then let's maybe delve into why we think this is happening.
Well, first of all, Hollywood is not a reflection of our culture. Hollywood is a propaganda generating machine that portrays some image of what somebody thinks is a good, portrays good cultural values. So it has nothing to do with the way people actually think. And the Hollywood, I think that Indiana Jones made $62 million their first week. Well, that's 1/5 of the production cost on the opening week. They're never going to recover their money. So this is the only way Hollywood's going to really respond, is when they realize that woke is broke, and they're going to pay the price. I mean, you can have all sorts of ideologies, but when it comes right down to it, it's what's in the pocketbook that speaks. And the people are rejecting this concept. And I've commented on this before. I call it the age of the testiculated female. And these female characters are not characters, they're caricatures. And they represent, here's a 120-pound girl that comes up and throws a 300-pound man on the ground and makes him succumb to her superior strength and knowledge of combat and the martial arts, when in reality, the man, regardless of what that size of a woman could do, the man could just come up and put his arms around her and just crush her. But nonetheless, it's like I said, it's a total joke. It's propaganda, and the men are being portrayed as weak, incompetent, bad decision makers, and the women on one hand have all of the alpha male characteristics of leadership, protection, security. And then the next scene, they're nurturing female characteristics, more typical of real female characteristics, but they exhibit both the male and the female. So they're assuming both roles, and a male is thrown into just no role. He has no place. He's unneeded. And in a sense, if you look at us primitively, the man to the woman in the structure of the family back in the Stone Ages represented protection. He was going to protect the family. So this is, if you don't, in a society where you don't need protection, it can be argued that it's no longer necessary. And also, testosterone-laden males represent a threat to authority because they constantly are questioning authority. And if there's anything authority hates, it's questions.
Yeah, that's a great point, which goes into another subject. Like we said, that we go a little bit deeper here, but like gender identity, the whole thing between male and female, masculine and femininity. And, I don't ever remember in my adult life ever spending so much time on other people's belief in what or who they think their gender is. And I always thought it was fairly simple, genetically or biologically, the human species. There's either a male or there's a female, and you hit upon it. There's characteristics, physical ones, obviously, but there's also emotional characteristics that we historically place on one or the other. And that's that fine line. And you have to wonder, is this emasculation, the temple of emasculation in Hollywood, is this some part of a grander scheme? Because those in authority feel threatened by the alpha male, and especially by the alpha males that continue to live by core value sets that can be described as traditional or conservative, commonsensical, rational, logical, reasonable? Is it because people that actually think, could be a man, could be a woman, actually are somehow a threat to those people in power?
Absolutely. And that can be proven historically. The first groups that Hitler and Stalin attacked were the intellectuals, the thinkers, the people who use critical thought. And those people are killed. They're identified. And so you people have been taking online IQ tests. The government knows if you're really smart. So when the day comes, if a tyrannical figure takes over this country, you're going to be the first one on the chopping block. You're not going to have a trial. You're just going to be eliminated. So this is provable as an effective strategy for tyrants. So, you can't ignore facts, and you really can't ignore history if you know history. But if you don't know history, you can't. You're just lacking in a huge knowledge base that's there for your benefit, not for the benefit of others.
Hence the reason statues are being torn down and institutions are being dismantled, which brings me even further as we dig deeper into the concept of the useful idiot. That's probably the next group that gets shipped off to be eliminated. Once those in power have used groups of people for their own intentions and the intellectuals disappear, then the useful idiots disappear. So then you have a society of collective thinkers that just do whatever those in power tell them to do. And the useful idiots, without labeling anybody, I think we know who they are. And certain groups, again, we don't condone any violence or any of that against anybody or any group of people, but people that are being used by those in power for some clandestine program just need to be aware. They need to give due diligence to the mantras that they support, the narratives that they support. Otherwise, they might meet the same fate of those who question authority.
Sure. But part of the purpose of the propaganda machine is to make people uncertain, to shake their beliefs, to make them feel that uncomfortable in their lack of knowledge or understanding of what's going on. And of course, who would be the first figure you'd have to attack in our culture? Who's the most masculine figure we probably have in our history? It's George Washington. I mean, there was a general, there was a man that was just an intellectual and joined the crowd, but he always wore his military uniform. He never forgot that he was a military man and he was a leader, and he was saying, "I am the leader." And those type of people are an anathema to tyrants, to Stalin, and so they have to be eliminated. And the easiest way you deal with them is just to kill them. They'd say it, but that's the way it happened. And there's 100 million of those types examples of that just in the 19th or 20th century, with Stalin, Pol Pot, Mao Zedong, and a host of other minor ones that don't even really count. Hugo Chavez and
Idi Amin,
and Idi Amin, those people where they just do, maybe 10,000 at a time. It really doesn't appear as much. 10,000 doesn't appear as a blip on the radar in that game. So you people that are really smart, you're either better use that smarts to convince others to use critical thinking, or you're going to be the number one target. And believe me, they know. And so you and I are certainly fall into that group, and we're not afraid to show it. But also we recognize that we pose a threat, but we pose a threat to tyranny. And I'm proud to pose a threat to tyranny.
Absolutely. You mentioned George Washington, and I'm going to have to throw Jefferson and Adams under the bus. Two men that were their founding fathers that didn't agree on very much. But one thing that they did agree on was the need for a new form of government that usurped tyranny and overbearing governments that took advantage of the citizens that they represented. And you're totally right, Dan. I'm proud of it too. If my name is ever mentioned in the same sentence as Washington, Adams, and Jefferson, it would be a badge of honor, because we do have to confront and reject tyranny wherever we see it. And we thank God each and every day that we can still have a show like this, which means they haven't pulled the plug yet. But that doesn't mean that we become passive and we just ignore the things that we see. So when we see this propaganda machine continuing to emasculate men, alpha males who can threaten tyranny, we have to say something and have a conversation about it. And if somehow people want to cancel that conversation, then we know where their hearts and minds are at. Yeah.
And John, how many people are confused about their sex? Very few, very few. Maybe 2% of the population, and that's just a number I grabbed. So certainly you can dispute it, but it's not a particularly what I would consider even a significant portion of the population that has these issues. But yet they have thrown this question, the people that are proponents of this propaganda have put forth this question to make even people who don't have, are just going through normal growing pains, as they used to call them, and wondering how their behavioral roles fit in. These are very few and far between, and they're just not deserving of the attention that we've given to issues like transgenderism. It's something, and there ought to be doctors that specialize in dealing with those cases, both from the emotional and physical basis. But this small portion of the population, it's what portion of the population has some disease of some kind. It's incidental or just small in nature. Yes, address it. Address it the way the scientific method says you should address it. But as far as a big issue that should occupy 50% of my thinking time is ridiculous. I won't give it that position in my hierarchy of things that are important. So if you got problems with that, I really feel sorry for you, but there is professional help available. And then understand too, parents, that every girl, probably every girl that I've ever known at one time in their development, when they're 8, 9, or 10 years old, and they're beginning to turn into a female, and they no longer can beat the boys that they used to tower over. This is quite a common experience to say, "Ooh, I wish I was a boy. Boys got a better deal." But to appreciate feminism requires those experiences, but it also requires thought and just plain old maturity and time. And it's a shame that so many that somebody would take advantage of females that are going through that questionable period and mutilate their bodies for life. It's just it's unfathomable. But again, these people are trying to throw doubt into your way of thinking that there is no way, and then there will appear this great savior that has all of the answers, and everybody feels they can get behind. And there you go. Now you got your tyranny.
Yeah, somebody told me one time, great points, by the way. They said, if you're ever confused about your gender, and I don't want anybody to take this any other way, they just said, pull your pants down, check it out. You'll know what sex you are. The confusion that you just mentioned comes in something emotional, a desire, a want, some hormonal thing that happens normally, doesn't mean that we have to jump on the bandwagon and become, like you say, a mutilator of our own selves. And those that support that, I would have to say, not only for the people that are confused, but those that support that, I feel sorry for you too, that you somehow think that it's okay to destroy people's lives for some nefarious goal. But, so all I can say is that demand movies with alpha males. Alpha males will always be here. Alpha males may be the people or the persons or the characters that save you when the stuff really hits the fan. The guys that have values, the guys that understand right from wrong, and those that believe in something greater than themselves. These are not authoritarians. They're authoritative, and there's a difference. Any closing thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, probably 100 of them, but maybe I think we've probably covered this subject as deeply as we need at this point.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, and thank you for listening to another episode of Mind Matters. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Mind Matters. Remember, your mind matters, but only if you use it. Stay alert, stay alive, keep your eyes wide open.